The doctors said I was gone for 4 minutes and 12 seconds. 4 minutes. That's how long it takes to make a cup of coffee. Or in my case, to see what lies beyond this world. When your heart stops beating and the doctors are frantically trying to bring you back, something happens that science can't explain. Something I never believed until it happened to me. I saw my children there. All of them, including the one I never got to hold in this life. What I'm about to share with you changed everything I thought I knew about being a mother. It's going to sound unbelievable, and honestly, if someone had told me this story a year ago, I might have smiled politely and changed the subject. But I'm not asking you to believe me. Not yet. I'm just asking you to listen, because what I saw about our children in the afterlife is something every parent needs to hear. Before I continue, I'd love to know where you're watching this video from. Are we neighbors? Is anyone watching from Georgia? Let me know in the comments, and please subscribe if you're curious about what happened during those 4 minutes when I was technically, well, dead. You know, I've never been comfortable with the spotlight. I'm just a regular mom from Marietta, the kind who used to clip coupons and worry about whether my kids were eating enough vegetables. I certainly never expected to be sharing something this personal with strangers. But some truths are too important to keep to yourself. It was just an ordinary Thursday afternoon. Lord, how we take those ordinary days for granted. I was in my kitchen making my grandson's favorite chicken casserole. The one with the cornflake topping. I'll have to share that recipe sometime. I remember reaching for the salt when suddenly, the strangest feeling came over me. It wasn't exactly pain. Not at first. It was more like, you know when you're swimming, and you suddenly realize you've drifted too far from shore? That moment of something's not right here. My chest tightened. The room started spinning like a carnival ride. I managed to knock the phone off the counter and hit speed dial for my daughter Sarah before everything went dark. The next thing I remember is the strangest sensation. I was looking down at myself. Now, I know how that sounds, but stick with me here. There I was, looking at my own body on a hospital gurney. Doctors were rushing around, someone was shouting about paddles, and a nurse was cutting away my favorite blouse, the blue one with the little flowers that my husband always liked. And I remember thinking, well, shoot, I just bought that on sale. Isn't it funny what goes through your mind at a moment like that? But here's the thing, I wasn't scared. Not one bit. There was this incredible peace washing over me, like finally setting down a heavy bag you've been carrying for miles. And then came the light. Now, I've heard people talk about the light before, and I always pictured something harsh, like staring into high beams on a dark road. But this wasn't like that at all. This light was warm and inviting, like when you open the curtains on a perfect spring morning and the sunlight fills the room. I felt myself being drawn toward it, moving through what seemed like a tunnel. The hospital sounds faded away, replaced by the most beautiful music, not like anything I've heard on earth. It was like, if peace had a sound, this would be it. That's when things got real interesting. As I moved through this tunnel of light, I started to sense presences around me. And then, clear as day, I saw them. My children. There was Michael, my oldest, strong and steady just like his father. There was Sarah, my beautiful girl with her infectious laugh. And David, my youngest, always so full of questions. They were somehow illuminated from within, each with their own unique glow. But there was someone else there too. A little boy, about 5 years old, with eyes that I recognized immediately as my own. My breath caught, if you can even have breath in that state. This was the baby I'd lost during my second pregnancy. The child I never got to meet. The empty space at our dinner table that no one ever mentioned, but I felt every single day. For 27 years, I'd carried that loss like a stone in my pocket, always there, weight never changing. I never even told people I had 4 children instead of 3. When asked, I'd always say 3, then feel that familiar pang of guilt, like I was betraying him somehow. But there he was. And he knew me. He called me mommy in a voice I'd never heard but somehow recognized deep in my soul. I need to take a breath here, because even now, telling you this, it's a lot. He ran to me, my little boy who never learned to walk on earth. He wrapped his arms around me, and I felt 27 years of silent grief just dissolve, like ice in warm water. I've been waiting to meet you, he said, but it's not time yet. You have to go back. I wanted to argue. Lord knows, I wanted to stay there with him, to finally hold the child I'd grieved for so long. But then he said something that changed everything. We're all okay, mommy. We're all in God's hands. Me, Michael, Sarah, even David, especially David. Now, let me tell you about David. My youngest had walked away from faith years ago. After college, he just drifted, stopped coming to church, started dating a girl who didn't believe in anything bigger than herself. It broke my heart. I'd been praying for him every single day, wondering if those prayers ever made it past my ceiling. But in that moment, I understood something profound. God sees our children differently than we do. Where I saw my son's rebellion, God saw his journey. Where I saw distance, God saw a path leading home. My little one James, I named him later, showed me that my children were never really mine to begin with. They were on loan, precious gifts I was entrusted to guide and love, but ultimately, they belong to God first. Do you believe that a mother's or a grandmother's prayers continue to echo in heaven? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one of them and often pray with you. As James held my hand, a voice spoke, not out loud, but somehow inside and all around me at the same time. It said, "They're your children on earth, but they are my children for eternity." And just like that, the weight of motherhood, all the worry, all the fear, all the "am I doing this right?" lifted from my shoulders. I saw my prayers for my children as physical things like beautiful, glowing seeds, being carefully collected and stored. Not a single one lost or forgotten. I saw angels holding these prayers, waiting for just the right moment to plant them in my children's lives. For David, I saw prayers from years ago only now beginning to sprout. God's timing, not mine. It hit me like a ton of bricks. All those late nights rocking babies, all those worried drives waiting for teenagers to come home, all those tearful prayers for adult children making choices I couldn't understand. None of it was wasted. Not a single moment. The love I felt in that place was, well, I don't have words big enough. It was perfect love, the kind that casts out fear. I felt God's presence surrounding me like the warmest embrace, like being held by both a perfect father and the most tender mother at the same time. And I understood, this is how God loves my children. This is how God loves all children. You know, I've spent most of my life in church. I've heard all the sermons about God's love. I've sung all the hymns. But experiencing that love firsthand, there's no comparison. It's like the difference between reading about the ocean and actually standing on the shore with the waves washing over your feet. In that moment, I understood that no matter how far my children might wander in this life, they were never outside of God's sight. He saw each one of them clearly, even David, who hadn't darkened the church door in years. God saw the light in him that I sometimes doubted was still there. And James, sweet James, the child I never got to know on earth, was there, whole and perfect and known by God. All the questions I'd carried, what would he have looked like? What would his laugh have sounded like? What would his gifts have been? None of that mattered anymore. He was complete. He was loved. He was waiting. If you're a mother who has lost a child, whether during pregnancy, at birth, or later in life, I need you to hear me. What I experienced showed me that no one is truly lost in God's sight. They are being kept safe, waiting for a reunion that will come. I know this now, not just as a matter of faith, but because I've seen it with my own eyes. The most beautiful part was seeing how all my children were connected, not just to me, but to each other. The love between them was visible, like golden threads binding them together. Even James and my other children, who had never met in this life, were connected by these threads of love. I realized then that family extends beyond what we can see. The bonds we forge here continue there. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is lost. As I stood there, taking it all in, I noticed something else too. My children's lives were like tapestries, with every prayer I'd ever prayed for them woven into the fabric. The prayers weren't just heard. They were active, living things that had shaped who they were becoming. All those nights I'd spent on my knees, wondering if I was just talking to myself, those prayers had power. They were creating something beautiful in the spiritual realm that I couldn't see from earth. And here's something that surprised me. I could see prayers from generations back affecting my children's lives. My mother's prayers for me, and her prayers for my children, they were still active, still working. My grandmother's prayers to a woman who had died before my children were even born, her prayers were still bearing fruit in their lives. That's when I understood that a mother's prayers transcend time itself. When we pray for our children, we're not just affecting their present. We're shaping their future and even their eternity. Just as I was beginning to grasp all this, everything shifted. The light, the peace, my James, it all began to recede. I heard beeping, felt pain rushing back, and opened my eyes to see a doctor looking as surprised as I felt. "Welcome back," he said. "We almost lost you." Little did he know, I hadn't been lost at all. I'd been found. The doctors later told me I had flatlined for 4 minutes and 12 seconds. A miracle, they called it. A perfectly reasonable medical explanation. They said a random electrical restart of my heart after a massive cardiac event. But we know better, don't we? When I came back, I came with a mission. To never stop praying for my children. To trust God's timing. To remember that my love for them, as fierce and protective as it is just a shadow of God's love for them. It took me several days in the hospital to process everything I'd experienced. I didn't tell the doctors or nurses. How could I explain it in a way that wouldn't sound crazy? But when my family came to visit, I could see them in a new light. It was like looking at them with heaven's eyes. Michael came first, looking worried and exhausted from the overnight drive from Charlotte. My responsible firstborn, always carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. But now I could see beyond his stress to the beautiful soul beneath the little boy who used to catch fireflies in mason jars and release them with a prayer. Sarah arrived next, with her 2 children in tow. My practical, no-nonsense daughter who rarely showed emotion broke down in tears when she saw me, and I held her just like I had when she was small. But this time, I saw the golden light within her, the same light I'd seen in heaven. David came last. My wandering son, the one whose absence at church had broken my heart for years. He stood awkwardly at the door, hands in his pockets, not sure what to say. But oh, if he could have seen what I saw when I looked at him now. The flickering light within him was stronger than he knew. I wanted to tell them everything right then and there, but the words wouldn't come. How do you describe colors to someone who's never seen them? How do you explain the taste of honey to someone who's never tasted sweetness? So I just held their hands and told them I loved them. That God loved them even more. That nothing, not distance or disagreement or even death, could separate us from that love. And slowly, over the next few weeks as I recovered, I began to share pieces of my experience. Not all at once, they weren't ready for that. But in quiet moments, when the time was right. One evening, about a month after I came home from the hospital, David stopped by unexpectedly. He sat at my kitchen table, fidgeting with a coffee mug, and finally asked, "Mom, what was it like when you know?" And so I told him about the peace, about the light, about seeing him there, and how his light was dimmer but still fighting to shine. He listened quietly, eyes fixed on his coffee. When I finished, he looked up with tears in his eyes. "Do you really think God still sees something good in me?" "Oh, my heart. I don't think it, honey," I told him. "I know it. I saw it with my own eyes. What I saw about my children in heaven taught me that a mother's love doesn't end with death. It's eternal because it reflects God's love." Today, when I feel like giving up, I remember that vision. God showed me, no mother prays in vain. Back in the day, when my kids were small, I used to worry about everything. Are they eating right? Are they learning enough? Are they making friends? Are they safe? As they grew, the worries just got bigger. Are they making good choices? Are they finding their purpose? Are they keeping their faith? But after what I experienced, those worries don't have the same hold on me. Don't get me wrong, I still care deeply about all those things. But I care with hope now, not fear, with trust, not anxiety. Because I've seen the end of the story. I've glimpsed how God holds all of our stories together in His hands. And it's beautiful, y'all. More beautiful than we can imagine. About 3 months after my experience, out of the blue, David called me on a Sunday morning. "Mom," he said, "I'm thinking about going to church today. Would you like to come with me?" Would I like to? Honey, I nearly dropped the phone. But I played it cool. "Sure," I said, like this wasn't the answer to years of prayer. "That sounds nice." We went to a little church near his apartment, not my usual denomination, but the Lord was there, and that's what matters. David sat stiffly in the pew at first, like he'd forgotten how to be in God's house. But by the end of the service, I saw his shoulders relax, saw him singing along to the closing hymn. It wasn't a dramatic conversion story. He didn't run down to the altar or make any grand declarations. Just a small step back toward the light. But I knew what I'd seen in heaven, those prayers from years ago, just now beginning to sprout. God's timing, not mine. The most beautiful change was in how I see my role as a mother now. I stopped trying to control outcomes and started trusting the process. I stopped worrying about appearances and started focusing on the heart. When Sarah was having trouble in her marriage, instead of giving advice, I asked if I could pray with her. When Michael was passed over for a promotion he deserved, I reminded him that God's timeline rarely matches our own. And James, I talk about him now. For nearly 3 decades, I'd carried that loss like a secret burden. The baby I'd never mentioned, the grief I'd never fully processed. But now, I speak his name freely. He's part of our family story. He's waiting for us. Last Christmas, I even hung a special ornament on the tree for him. Michael noticed at first a little angel with James' name and the date. He got real quiet, then asked, "Is that for the baby you lost before I was born?" I nodded, and he wrapped his arms around me in the tightest hug. "I can't wait to meet my big brother someday," he whispered. That's the thing about love that crosses dimensions, it heals in ways we never expected. I want to tell every mother listening right now, the love you have for your children, that fierce, protective, would move mountains for them love, that's just a glimpse of how God loves them. And just as your love doesn't stop when your child makes a mistake, neither does his. In fact, I've come to believe that motherhood itself is one of God's greatest gifts to us, not just because of the children we receive, but because it gives us a tiny glimpse of God's heart. When I look at my children and feel that overwhelming love, I'm experiencing just a fraction of what God feels when He looks at each of us. The greatest comfort I've found is knowing that my children belong first to God. That takes the pressure off me to be perfect. I don't have to have all the answers. I don't have to fix every problem. I just have to point them toward the one who can. So if you're sitting there right now, worried about a child who's wandered far from faith, or grieving a child you've lost, or just feeling like you're failing as a mother, take heart. The bonds of love don't break when our bodies do. The prayers you whisper in the dark are being collected like precious stones in heaven. If this message spoke to you, please share this video with someone in your family. Maybe they need to remember there's still hope for their children, even when they seem lost. I learned something else during those 4 minutes and 12 seconds, something I want to leave you with. God doesn't just see our children as they are now. He sees who they were created to be. He sees the complete picture, past, present, and future all at once. So when you're looking at your child's current struggles and feeling hopeless, remember, you're seeing just one frame of a beautiful film that God sees in its entirety. You know, after my experience, people often ask me if I'm afraid of dying now. The truth is, I'm not afraid of death anymore, but I'm not in a hurry either. God made it clear I still have work to do here. Part of that work is sharing this message with you. Another part is living differently as a mother and grandmother because of what I've seen. These days, when my grandkids come over, I look at them differently. I still make them cookies and bandage their scraped knees, but I also see the eternal souls they carry. When I tuck them in at night, I don't just pray for their safety or success, I pray for their hearts, for their relationship with God, for the adults they'll become. One night, my 7-year-old granddaughter asked me, "Grandma, is heaven real?" Instead of giving her some watered-down answer, I told her, "Yes, sweetheart. It's more real than anything we see here, and it's more beautiful than we can imagine. Have you been there?" she asked, with that innocent curiosity only children have. "Just for a visit," I told her. "And someday, a long time from now, we'll all be there together." She seemed satisfied with that answer and drifted off to sleep. But I stayed by her bed a little longer, watching her breathe, marveling at how this tiny person contained an eternal soul. How privileged I am to guide her, even for a short time. My near-death experience changed me fundamentally as a mother. I no longer parent from a place of fear, but from a place of trust. I know now that my love for my children, as deep and vast as it is just a shadow of God's love for them. I don't know what challenges you're facing with your children today. Maybe you have a prodigal child who seems beyond reach. Maybe you're grieving a loss that feels too heavy to bear. Maybe you're just tired, bone deep tired from the daily work of mothering. Wherever you are, I want you to know this. Your prayers matter. Your love matters. Your faithfulness matters even when you can't see the results yet. Remember those prayers I saw in heaven? The ones being stored up like seeds, waiting for the right time to sprout. Some had been there for decades. Some had come from generations back, grandmothers and great-grandmothers who had never seen the fruit of their prayers in their lifetime. But not a single one was wasted. Not a single one was forgotten. That's why I keep praying for my children every day, even now that they're grown. That's why I encourage them in faith, even when it feels awkward or they seem unreceptive. That's why I try to model God's love, even when I fall short. Because I've seen the end of the story. And it's worth every tear, every worry, every sleepless night. Today, I say to all mothers, never stop praying. Never stop teaching about faith. A mother's love continues beyond death, but the greatest gift we can give our children is to guide them to God. Thank you for listening to my story. If it touched your heart, if it gave you hope, please subscribe and share it with someone who might need to hear it. We're all in this journey together, this beautiful, challenging journey of motherhood that extends far beyond what our eyes can see. God bless you. And remember, in the eyes of heaven, your prayers for your children are more powerful than you know.